A to the K.
to the K.
To the K. Hello, one and all. Welcome to What If, a series where we look at hypothetical situations and discuss what would happen if they became a reality. So, firstly,
Never heard of a show doing that before,
never, yeah,
except Marvel.
innovative here. Oh yeah, I suppose those guys did too. Yeah, obviously, if you've been, watching or listening to us for a while, you know that we've done shows. We've done what ifs on things like what if the Montreal Screwjob never happened? What if the NWO didn't form? What if God was one of us? I can't remember. But we've done some.
Just a slob. Yeah. Um, I, I'm trying to remember. Didn't we haven't we famously had every what if come back to the same thing
I think they all
as
tend
well?
to, yeah, they all tend to kind of lead down the same
Because I
journey.
remember when we talked about the click, you blew my mind because everything come back to I had Brett in some way. I can't remember what it was now. I'm
Basically, it
like,
all it
what the
all comes
fuck?
back to Brett because it's me at the end of the day, and I will find a way to get
Um,
it all back to Brett.
so I'm curious how we're gonna get this back to Brett.
Well, we'll see, shall we? We'll see. Let's try and find out. But before we do get into it, so firstly, thank you to everybody who voted on our Instagram stories. So we put up a story on there to say what segment should we do next, and we had
Yeah.
the debate, we had superstar spotlight, we had some other ones, and we had what if, and obviously what
We
if
had
is the
top
chosen one.
tens and what
Top
if.
tens, that's what it was. And obviously, yes, so we've chosen what if as the unique segment of this week, but also you picked the actual what if to talk about, and we've gone with what if Vince McMahon resigns from
Do you know what?
WWE.
We love interacting as much as we can, and I think sincerely, it's awesome to see that we've had such good response to these sort of questions, and we hope that obviously it makes for an enjoyable what if. We enjoy doing the what ifs, but it's great that this is the first one we've done, I believe, Carl, where it's been picked by our Instagram following. So that's
It
cool.
is. We're trying to kind of, we're trying to do more of that, I think. So basically, if we had all them people responding to it and only like four people watching it, then we'd be fuming, basically. But let's see. Let's see.
You better fucking follow through with this, guys.
Yeah, you show the intent, damn it, so you better stick with it. But so obviously, if you've been living under a rock, you won't be aware. But if you haven't, then you'll be aware that there's current investigations going on around Vince McMahon, which has seen him step down temporarily from his role as chairman and CEO of WWE. Obviously, this isn't the first time Vince has stepped down. He actually stepped down in 1994 amidst the steroid trial. And Linda actually was the one to assume the position on a temporary basis. And here we are 28 years later, where history repeats itself, and his daughter Stephanie has currently assumed his role. Now, it's entirely possible that Vince does come out of this, resumes his position, and we wait for it all to blow up. What's that thing from Shaun of the Dead? Yeah, that thing. Just wait for it all to blow over. But for the purposes of this segment, we're going to delve into what if Vince McMahon resigns, Anthony?
What if?
What
So,
if?
Carl, as typically we always tend to do, we can't talk about every possibility. If there's one thing we've learned from, are we talking decades? 2008 originally, with decades of Marvel films, um, is that, there are branch realities here, Carl. And we
Mm-hmm.
can't talk about every possibility. So we're kind of going to zone in on one or two. But I think if we talk in brief about, like, what are the possible options here? So Vince chooses to step down permanently now. Firstly, he could talk wholesaling the whole thing. Like, the McMahons are no longer anything to do with WWE. The WWE is sold, right? So we have possibilities in WWE sold, and then who's it possibly sold to? We've talked in the past saying, well, could Disney buy it, or could am I wrong in saying Peacock might be part of Disney or whatever? But Peacock are heavily involved in network stuff. Could Peacock end up with it? So that it could be completely bought out by another entity, right? So we can talk on that. But then there's the other possibility that he steps down permanently, retires, if you will, but it's still part of the McMahon family. So who takes over? Does
The
Steph
Mc
take?
family.
Does Steph take the mantle permanently? Does she then make any wholesale changes to the creative side of things? Is Triple H going to assume a bigger role as part of the Stephanie McMahon era, if you will? So
Should we touch on that bit first then? I mean,
okay,
in
let's
an
go.
ideal world, we would go down the multiverse of McMahon. But as you said, I think this would be like a 4 part bloody, yeah. Basically, we'd get to, Infinity War, you're fired. Is where we'd end up. But so essentially, if we start off with, if he does step down and
Yeah.
he resigns, retires, whatever, who do we think is going to be that replacement? So you've already mentioned, could it be Steph? Could it be Triple H?
I
You've
mean, for
obviously
me,
got.
like no disrespect to Triple H, and I think they will be seen as like a power couple. I think for me, the obvious step would be Stephanie takes on the role permanently that she's already stepping into in the interim. I think it'd be a great PR move to have like a woman CEO, you know, running the company, and it's still a McMahon, and that's no disrespect to Triple H, but the name I think will be important to Vince in that sense. So I think the likelihood is that if he was to step down and it not be like WWE's getting sold on, I think Steph will maintain the position. But then what
Okay.
changes does that make? Because I do think Triple H being part of the power couple who run WWE, I think Triple H should be more heavily involved. And then,
Well, the
there's
interesting
other.
thing with it
Oh,
though is that Stephanie was taking a leave of absence, wasn't she, until this
she
whole
was
thing
stepping
came
down.
up.
Yeah.
And part of the assumptions people were making was that this was a Nick Khan like decision to essentially start phasing Stephanie out for poor performance as the what is he, the chief brand officer or whatever the role that she had was.
Hmm.
So if this hadn't happened, then it could have been possible Stephanie wouldn't even be with the company. So part of me does wonder if Vince goes, how secure is her job? Like you can talk about
Well,
Triple H. I think you're right. He only comes with Steph as like a package deal. You've got Shane McMahon. That's not going to happen. So
you
would it
got to
be
wonder
Nick
though,
Khan who takes it over?
like I don't know how the board of directors situation works, whether there'd be a fight in that sense. But if she remains in her position as chairman, then she's Nick's boss essentially. And if Nick was one of the reasons that she's not around, then you got to wonder is the flip reverse could be there. It's not necessarily about her job being safe, but is Nick Khan's job safe?
Damn. To quote you, you just blew my tiny little mind because I didn't even think about that. Because I think at the minute you think of WWE and you think that Nick Khan's got such a stronghold on everything that's going on there at the moment. It
Yeah.
ultimately does come down to the the board of directors. Do they look at it as a wrestling company or do they look at it as an entertainment company?
See, I think there's going to be some careful thinking here though, because like Nick Khan is good for it being a sports entertainment company. Like, he treats it like the NFL and stuff. I know that's what they were going for. Like he's trying to treat it more like that, but at the same time, the board of directors will have to be very aware of the controversy of like ousting the McMahons as a whole. Like if they don't appoint Steph or someone, let's say Steph was on the cards and they go, no, we're not going to have her be chairman, and they try and put the kibosh on that for Nick's sake, then that's going to cause a controversy that will maybe even affect the shareholding, the share price and stuff like that, because it's like that's going to cause a lot of negative press, isn't it? So they might look at it from a point of view of going, it's better to keep a McMahon in power so that it doesn't affect the money they make in terms of, I say, the risk to the company and people like selling shares and whatever.
Okay.
I'm no expert on the share thing, Carl, but I know she did some songs back in the '90s, but I don't know much about her. And that might go over some people's heads.
All
But
right
yeah,
then.
for
So
me,
for for this
I
reality
think
then, for this reality, do we say that it kind of sort of stays as it is in terms of Steph is instead of being the interim CEO, she becomes the CEO and chairwoman.
yes. So this is very much the queendom.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So it becomes Steph's baby, which is kind of what she's always wanted. Nick Khan is kept on in the short term
Yep.
to advise her on from a business standpoint.
Yep.
So obviously, one thing that Vince is still in charge of, regardless of him stepping down, which he just wouldn't be there to do anymore, is the creative.
See, here's an interesting one for me because we haven't just got the Vince situation. I think in this scenario, I think if Vince goes by by the context of it all, I think Johnny Ace goes as well.
I think Johnny Ace is gone, to be honest. I think
Yeah, I think you're
he's.
right, but I think there's no way Johnny Ace stays. There's no world in which Johnny Ace stays and Vince goes. If Vince ultimately goes, there's no way he got saved because it's
I
the same
mean,
controversy, isn't it?
got to look at it. It probably reaches wider. It's essentially jobs for the boys at the minute, isn't it? It's Vince McMahon's boy club. You've got obviously Johnny Ace is already out probably, but then you've got the likes of Kevin Dunn. Do we finally see the little camera cuts every 2 seconds? Does that change? Do we have
No, it's not the
obviously
same without the camera cuts.
we've got Bruce Pritchard. Does he stay
See,
on? Is
I
he
think I
needs
think
to stay on?
Pritchard, he seems to have evaded controversy so far. I think, did he get tagged to the bin bag situation possibly?
No, no. I mean, to be fair, he's pretty squeaky clean, but part of me thinks he's got such pull, same as Kevin Dunn, because of his association with Vince. So if you
But
think about it,
would Bruce be wise enough to realize that the powers with Steph now? You know what I mean? Like, I think I could see Bruce staying, but I think there's like a few holes to fill there. I think she's gonna have to restock here. I think Triple H for me would be the one who takes over the creative element.
hmm,
He proved himself with NXT, um, and obviously he's the king to a queen, if you will. So
well,
to
I
me,
mean,
it just makes
interestingly,
sense.
it just reminded me back when Steph was like, doing the GM role or whatever for SmackDown. She was the head writer. It was her and Paul Heyman.
Mm,
So she was technically, you know, controlling the main storylines of SmackDown during that time. So
yeah,
imagine the kind of power struggle between Steph and Triple H. Like Triple H has always had NXT as his baby. Go away and do what you want. Like if he gets brought to the main roster, is he then going to have to fight that with
I
Steph?
honestly, we might see a world where they're fully aware of that scenario, and Steph is creative for SmackDown, for instance, and Triple H takes Raw,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
a
don't
fair
bump into
show,
each other because they just go, "We'll each take a show, and we won't clash."
which would probably make for two very different TV shows. Like you look at Raw and SmackDown today, and they are basically the same TV show with different talent. And it's all the
For
same
me,
rigmarole, isn't it?
if you had this scenario, right, and you have Steph's in charge of one, Steph's obviously overall in charge, but Steph's in charge of SmackDown, Triple H is in charge of Raw. That's when the brand split could matter a bit more because, as you say, they're two very different shows. So it would make that more relevant in a way.
Yeah, you could start to
Right now,
build up
it's
your rosters for the type of show you wanted to put out, essentially.
yeah, and right now it's all the same stuff, which is why they're constantly jumping to each other's shows because it's the same stuff going on.
Yeah, I
That's why
mean,
Roman is in like the champion of both shows and doesn't really turn up on any. But like
we know how
for
I feel
me,
about the
when
brand
you
split
put that
anyway.
clear distinction between what the shows are and what they're putting out, and you definitely get people who like I love SmackDown and don't like Raw and vice versa. That's when it makes sense that they're separate brands, even more so for me then.
So do you think then we would see a change to the wrestling style? Like at the minute, it's talked about a lot, isn't it? It's bandied about having to work the WWE style, and you see it like they have to like people who come over from the indies in the past, which is part and parcel of why they've one of the reasons they've stopped bringing indie people in is because they have to retrain them to work the WWE style. Do you think we would see a change to the overall style of wrestling? Would we get more flippy shit in WWE, for example?
I I think WWE had a bad history with flippy shit, right? They tried I still think it exists. I don't know, 205 live,
Hmm.
and that's meant to be the home of flippy shit. But they've never put much respect on it. They always wanted big beefy men. And I think this is where we might get the distinction between brands. I think Triple H has always been impressed by the likes of Adam Cole and the like that. And I think if he was left, as we're saying, to his own devices with, let's say, Raw, then I think you'd end up seeing more like flippy guys and less about the. They don't be wrong. There'll be a place for some big monster guys because that's what Triple H was. He's not going to acknowledge that doesn't sell, but I think we'll definitely get more respect put on like your athleticism over your muscle mass.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to that initial brand split when it was really good, it did feel like two very different shows. SmackDown was kind of the land of opportunity for the likes of your Edges and your Rey Mysterios and your Eddie Guerreros to like
Yeah,
actually
funnily enough.
step up your game. We saw new stars made in the likes of JBL and people like that, but you also had your vets and your Undertakers and that there as well. So you had that
Yeah.
blend. So whether or not that could work in that sense, maybe say Triple H took I mean, what would you even say? He took Raw, I guess, because SmackDown does the bigger numbers and they've got the biggest network deal. Maybe that's where you would see kind of, your SmackDown of old, essentially, where
And
it's a lot of
actually, I
opportunity
think
for new
that's
stars.
where I think that's how it would go as well. If this scenario came about and it was like one takes one show, one takes the other, I think the Triple H would take the show that he could take more risk on in terms of changes. So I think, like you say, SmackDown then would consequently, because it's drawing the bigger numbers, that would consequently stay more the WWE style than it ever was. And Raw would be the one where some changes and risks are actually taken.
Do you think, obviously, we're talking about like styles changing and stuff like that, and we're speaking about the different, like you mentioned Adam Cole then, for example, as like a prime person that Triple H saw stuff in that no one else, like Vince especially, didn't see anything in. Do you think we would see a change to the recruitment process? Because as you said at the minute, like you've got your big muscly guys and like no one gives any respect to the likes of 205 Live and stuff like that. Do you think we would see a change to the recruitment process? Or do you think it would be, the same for SmackDown, but then different for Raw, like because of the
Well,
different brands?
honestly, I think we would, in terms of like, I think the recruitment to the more flippy guys certainly would come back. And I say come back because obviously Triple H was responsible for getting a lot of people like Adam Cole and the like. And sadly, it was kind of him not having the same control, what kind of led to the whole rebrand of NXT and a lot of releases as well. So I think I think it would certainly open the doors to more recruitment and essentially more poaching, if you will, because AEW took on a lot of talent like that. I think the question really is like, people have had their fingers burnt with WWE, so would we see a lot of people come back, or do you think not so much?
I mean, I'm sure there's people that Vince has still got grudges with. I mean, in fairness to Vince, over time he's typically buried the hatchet with a lot of people who you thought that would
He
never be the
does. He
case.
definitely willing to put business before
But I'm
person.
sure there's a few,
Really.
like, not that he would ever go back anyway. They probably wouldn't want him, but people like Del Rio and stuff like that, which Vince very clearly has, fell out with. So I don't know whether there's any kind of people who are currently on the no-no list that would be let back in, if that makes sense. But I
Mm.
suppose I do wonder whether or not we would see, like, do you still think they would market it as a PG product?
So here's where I think again, this is where you might lean even more heavily into a brand split. That I think, left to his own devices, I think Triple H should give you a more TV-14,
Mm,
and SmackDown would remain again the standard WWE fare and the PG product. SmackDown would be your one your kids can watch with the you know Herculean type men, and Raw would then become this land of like slightly more edgy product.
yeah, I mean that as a concept in itself would be mad, wouldn't it? To have completely different, like it's the same company but with two different telly shows, one which is a TV-14 and one which is a kind of a PG. That in itself is a mad
But
idea.
again, like, it's mad to me that it's mad that it's a mad idea, because you think this is what it should have always been. Like back in the day, it was like Ric Flair is now part owning stuff, and then we had commissioners and we had different brands, and like they were meant to be rivaling each other and trying to outdo each other, and then they all just become very much the same. Like, I know it was all storylines, but for me, this is like, yeah, this is where like, why not have two very different shows? Why you're essentially competing with yourself otherwise.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing we definitely would see more of is tag team wrestling. Now, we know Vince has gone on record a million times why he hates tag team wrestling, because why pay, four guys to do the work of two guys, essentially, is how he looks at it in his head. He just doesn't get it. He's never been a massive fan of it. And so that's one of the main reasons you can just tell that it's so underutilized across the board at the minute. So
Mm.
you definitely see
Yeah.
more tag teams, I think.
I mean, I honestly, I would love to think that, and I'm not saying Vince has deliberately kept this down, but I would love to see a resurgence of the mid card. Like, we just don't have a mid card at the minute. Like, there's
No.
titles there, yeah, but we just don't have a fucking mid card. And I would love to see that Impact come back and have, like, you know what, because you can have more. Well, it's not even more flippy shit, but essentially your workers belt can probably hopefully get a bit more attention with a bit more or a bit of a different perspective on creative. Like, and that's no offense to Vince, but he just doesn't care about the mid card titles quite clearly.
This is what baffles me about that aspect of it. And do you think it's just a generational thing? Do you think that like they think people today can't focus on too many things at once, and so they're just going to keep the main stuff around the main titles of like the work? Even now, combining them, do you think it's too many storylines to follow? And if so, why have they moved to a 3-hour Raw, for example?
Exactly.
Like it just doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, that's another question. Would Raw stay 3 hours?
I mean, if it goes,
I mean, I suppose that boils down to TV contracts, doesn't it, more than anything? But
yeah, but also if it's a Triple H, Triple H, if he took control of that, he might say no, 3 hours is too long. I want to do it 2 hours and 2 hours of like wrestling, then another type of 1 hour show thing afterwards or something.
don't think it can last 3 hours now.
Nah, not anymore. He's got a dicky heart.
That's true.
Jokes,
That's true.
Jokes aside, but yeah.
So I mean, obviously, and I'm not saying again, I'm not implying that Vince is the sort of the reason these things don't happen, but in this scenario, given the relationships that are formed between the wrestlers and Triple H, do you think we'd see potentially more cross promotion with the likes of AEW? They've always said we're open for. I think it was actually Triple H who made the comment about being open for business, and we've seen them working with like Progress and stuff like that before, but not quite on the scale of like opening the forbidden door, as it were. Do you think we could see maybe more work with Impact or work with AEW? Because yes, the rivals, but the sense of good business for everyone is there.
Do you know what? It's a mad concept, this, because I genuinely don't know whether Vince is the gatekeeper behind this or not. Whether or not he's just as open to it, I legitimately don't know. I think you would assume that Vince doesn't want it because he doesn't even see them as competition. He looks at it. He doesn't look at it as a wrestling company. It's an entertainment company, so he has no competitors. So maybe he is. But as you said, Triple H did so much work with the likes of Evolve, and he even showed up at like ICW and stuff over here. Like he was everywhere, wasn't he? He was
Yeah,
signing
exactly.
stuff and using it as a pathway for NXT. So I definitely think for some of the smaller companies, it ultimately comes down to, do they view AEW as competition? Because
It's
if they
interesting
do,
though, isn't it? Because by not working with them, they're making it clear that they are competition.
yeah.
Because they've always worked with smaller companies with no bother because they're not a threat to them.
Yeah, but they phrase it as though they're not competition because then they do pro wrestling and they do entertainment and it's a different
Yeah.
sector. But
I know, but when and I know it was said in promos and stuff like that, but when they've been referred to as a pissant company before now, they try and judge them as considerably smaller. And to be fair, they are considerably smaller. It's surprising that like you say that there's obviously a threat value there to them currently.
yeah, it's intriguing though with the likes of, as feel like we're using Adam Cole way too much here, but Triple H loved Adam Cole, and essentially when Triple H couldn't run NXT the way he wanted to anymore, Adam Cole was like, "Yeah, I'm out of here." So would we see more talent who are close with Triple H start to make that move back over? For example, could it hurt AEW? And also, there's guys who are still there today on that WWE roster who are underutilized that Triple H loves. A prime example being Kevin Owens.
Yeah,
Does he get more
that's the
time?
thing. This could be a better world for KO, to be honest with you.
Well, that's it. You've got people today who you can very clearly see are like Vince McMahon guys, can't you? Where it's like, if that didn't exist and you weren't affording the amount of time, and it's no disrespect, but to like Lashley, to Omos, maybe even, and I like the stuff Ezekiel's done, for example, but that's kind of a Vince project as well, isn't it? Let's be honest. So is it taking time away from them and giving it to the people who have come from the indies and have, they're not just made in the WWE laboratory, and so they've got a bit of a grudge against them. Like Kevin Owens, will he finally get his chance to shine?
Mm,
Don't know.
yeah. And another question I've got for you with this, like obviously, Steph will have a perspective on this, and I don't fully know what that perspective would be. But in a world where Steph's in charge, he's CEO, and Ed and Triple H are running the show, are we going to see less reliance on older stars, like bringing back, Goldberg or bringing back John Cena and so on like that? Are they going to see more of the let's build the talent rather than bringing back the classics?
I think that
Because
solely
it's still a money making
depends.
tactic, really. But
Well, it solely depends on whether they can build new stars. That ultimately, like, that's the main reason why they get brought back today, is because Vince looks at the WrestleMania card, for example, and goes, "Well, what's WrestleMania looking like this year?" And let's be honest, he probably doesn't know that far out because it's not like it used to be.
mm,
But when he starts to look at it, he probably goes, "Fucking hell, that's looking pretty light. Let me ring up. Let me get my Rolodex out and let me ring up all
like
these."
Dwayne, buddy.
Exactly.
Um, well, I think though, when you look at it, Triple H has proven that he knows how to build stars.
Mm.
Like he's never built them on the main roster, but like he has built plenty of stars on NXT who've crossed over. Like, using straight off the top of my head, Finn Balor. I know there's plenty of others that are probably better examples, but well, Kevin Owens is an NXT star, isn't he?
Hmm.
And Seth Rollins and so on like that. They've proven they can build stars from the way Triple H does things. So if Triple H was left with a show and could build stars up, then the reliance consequently wouldn't be there on the older stars, would they?
No, I definitely think we would see more changes back at NXT because that's very much a Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard thing, isn't it? It was it's not working. We're going to do it as 2.0, and it's our, vision. I think we'll start to see changes to go more towards the black and gold that it used to be. No,
You might
not
even find
necessarily
like
look and feel, but I think
honestly, you
it's
might
going to be a
find that they
clear
do that
pathway.
though. They bring
But
back the black and gold as like part of a story. To be honest with you,
like they might do, but it's like we were saying before, weren't we? It's like talking about Karrion Kross when we were talking about the news. It's like he was killing it in NXT. They brought him up and stuck him in a bloody gladiator outfit with a mask on, and that's it. He was ruined. So it makes you think that it'd be a clearer pathway because it's Triple H would oversee NXT and
yeah.
main roster, so they bring him up as the same gimmick
But
essentially.
then, I mean, consequently, you might get like NXT is like a developmental for Raw because they go from Triple H's developmental brand to Triple H's main roster brand. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So there's loads of different ways they can spin it like that.
Hmm.
So I don't know though. I don't think we would see cross promotion with AEW as such, but maybe with you know.
Be nice to see more with Impact. The Mickey James stuff didn't last long enough for me, but it was great to see Mickey James rock up at the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, I think they might be open to like a little bit of a talent swap or a talent trade to, one or two. But I don't think we'll see like a WWE versus AEW like a Forbidden Door type
Yeah.
thing. I don't think we'd get that.
I think. I mean, on any level, no matter who's in charge, it's a really difficult thing to to do because like I know it's slightly different with the Japan USA thing because obviously AEW had more cause to be like, well, we need our stars to win because it's in our country and so on like that, and they didn't overly do it, but for the most, it was AEW getting the victory there. How do you do it between two brands that are clear rivals that you go, well, all our top stars can't lose to your top stars? It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, like
Whereas,
how do you barter that?
say for example, Kevin Owens is like, you know what, they're doing a Ring of Honor show, and I really, one of my things I never got to do in my life. I don't know when this happened, so don't come at me if it did. Say for example, it's like one of the things I never got to do was to do Kevin Owens versus CM Punk in Ring of Honor. The opportunities come up, can I do it?
Yeah,
They might go, yeah, okay,
yeah.
but I don't think we'll get a
But
full on.
like, but look at it now, right? As much as I like AEW, if you try to do a cross promotion now and you go, okay, we're on board for it. Like, we need to have our top star versus your top star. So we've got Roman Reigns versus Moxley.
Hmm.
I think Roman should win that.
Yeah,
But is that fair? Because then you then go and your top star is not as good as our top star. But at the same time, it'd be a banger of a match. They've got a history together and everything. It works perfectly. But how do you give either of them the win without it being a problem?
yeah. It kind of moves into kind of really clever booking territory where you don't let your two top stars face off ever. You'd have to do like a multi-man match or something, and someone else takes a pin who costs them and things. So it does get very
Yeah, yeah,
political to not overshadow each other and things. But
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
so
So we're ruling
okay,
that out. That's fair enough.
so in this reality, then we've got Vince resigns, Steph takes over with the support of Nick Khan from a business standpoint and a support of Triple H from a creative standpoint. We think that they might go for a little bit of a shake up with Raw being the kind of TV 14, whereas SmackDown viewed as the bigger show, um, obviously more kind of PG. We do see slight changes off the back of that in terms of the wrestling style, in terms of how NXT is run to progress people to the main roster, more tag teams. Can't remember what else we've said. But
Hopefully, and I know people, this might be a bit, what's the word? People might disagree with this, but I think it's needed. A resurgence of the women's roster. I think Steph
well,
would be big on that. But at the end of the day, like as good as the women's roster is, and I'm not knocking them at all, they're suffering a bit at the minute. Bailey's out, Charlotte's out, Sasha's out, Naomi's out. There's a lot of like missing people there who were big important factors. You know what I mean?
yeah, it depends how much you believe. that Steph was behind the women's revolution in the first place, whether or not it was just
But
something that got
I
trending on
don't.
Twitter and they went, okay, we'll rise to that, or
The
whether Steph was
trouble
the
is,
one
like,
really pushing it.
I don't think. I think it's irrelevant how it truly happened. I think the fact that from a PR point of view, if Steph's in charge, the women's division has to shine. I think, like, the media's already been there around it. So
Mm.
for the women's evolution to fail under Steph's leadership would be crazy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
It's a
I
shame.
think
It's a shame that it would come to that. It's a shame that it can't just happen on its own merit. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, well, because we've got a woman CEO, we probably need to have a really strong women's roster as well. And it's like,
Well, I mean, I
it should
think I
just
think they
exist.
need it. Like, I'm hoping that they're looking at it now and going, yeah,
Mm.
we need to push some talent here, and because they're already talking about that Nikita getting a push main roster wise because she's killing it on NXT. So I do think they are aware of it, but again, like, there'd be a vested interest in keeping that women's evolution going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
You
obviously
can't
you've
have
got
so many
stuff like
faces disappear.
Toxic Attraction and things like that, and Cora Jade and stuff down there. So there's a lot of stuff coming up the
Oh,
pipeline
fair play to
potentially.
Mandy
So
Rose. She's just totally killing it down there. Like, if she come back to the main roster as what she is now, I think she'd do an absolute stellar job. You know.
exactly, it just goes to show sometimes it's not seen as a demotion; it is seen as a reset button, isn't it? So
Yeah,
fair
exactly. Yeah.
play. I think ultimately, so I don't think we're saying it would change super drastically. At least in the short term, it would kind
Uh,
of.
what we're saying without overall saying it is, like, it probably changed for the better.
But
And
then to throw this spanner in the works, would they sell it? I actually think they would, and I think if they did end up selling it to the likes of Disney, that's when I think, do you know what? It won't like that's when the major change would happen because
sadly, we've talked an ideal, haven't we? Like, Steph running it, it still keeps wrestling roughly, maybe with some improvements, but we're talking like an ideal way, aren't we? Going, oh, wouldn't it be good if this happened? Like, it would keep wrestling. WWE should I say what we want it, right? Disney, and this might be an overstatement here, Carl, and I don't know how you feel about it, but Disney buying it, or any company who hasn't got the same interest in wrestling buying it, would be the death of WWE.
it could very well be. I think immediately, if it goes to Disney, like like Steph's influence and Steph's power, about the fact that she's a McMahon and all that kind of stuff gets watered down because it'll be looked at not as like, oh, it's the WWE. It's just looked at as another business property under the Disney umbrella, and so
Yeah.
they'll just, and that's why Nick Khan will be so important.
See, this is
To,
where I think if the House of Mouse or any company took it, right, that's where you wouldn't see, like, Steph running it.
no,
Nick Khan would end up being in charge. Like, they probably all cash out. I think it'd be controversial. I think the likes of Triple H and Steph would cash out at the same time as Vince, knowing that the whole thing's getting sold. But you'd see the likes of Nick Khan still there as, like, some sort of management for it on behalf of Disney, maybe. But you can just see it, can't you? They'll keep WWE as a product in some way. They'll certainly test the waters with it, whether they drop it completely and just keep the network stuff, I don't know. But imagine a scenario where, like, they're then crossing over with Star Wars and Marvel and stuff, and it just becomes so, like, beyond PG. Do you know what I mean? It just
mm.
goes so far away from being a
Well, I
wrestling
mean,
show that it would be unrecognizable.
you definitely have your crossovers. I mean, you have them now. You've got WWE and Scooby Doo and things like that, don't you? But you definitely have your kind of side crossovers. But I genuinely think
It's funny though,
so. What would
because
happen? Triple H would put all this effort into making Raw, TV 14, all this kind of stuff. The Disney will buy it. They'll get sacked, and it will go the most. It'll go like what's below PG. Is that a thing is that a thing in America for our American fans?
maybe
But essentially, what do they call it? They have a thing, don't they? Like
it's safe for all ages.
it's like TV. So they have like TVMA for mature, don't they? And they have something else for
Might be
um,
TVA.
TVA. I don't know what it is, but
Oh.
essentially,
Anyway, well, think
everyone.
about this, Carl. Right, here's one for you. Simpsons may have predicted the future,
Well, okay,
because
they predict everything
Simpsons.
else.
We had an episode of The Simpsons, the one that featured Luke Skywalker, where they go to a Comic Con. And in that episode, they had the robots from Star Wars wrestling robots from another sci-fi property, and I'm like, so we could legit, if Disney bought WWE, we could see C-3PO and R2-D2 in the wrestling ring, just like they were in The Simpsons.
I mean, we could. To be fair, we could.
So I'm just saying, maybe The Simpsons predicted this too.
Yeah, but I mean, to be
In fact,
fair,
shit, The Simpsons could actually be involved in WWE because they are now a Disney property.
There you go. We had Simpsons Wrestling on the PlayStation, didn't we? So yeah.
Bring back Simpsons Wrestling. There we go. It's all happening.
But yeah, for me, like I think if it goes that way that we've just said, it becomes a lot more likely that they sell. If they then go on to sell to Disney, then Steph, Triple H, a lot of these guys who have just got jobs because they've always had jobs and it's WWE will go, and it becomes very much a very PG, kid friendly orientated like show, and I think that'll be what eventually sort of kills it.
Yeah, I get you. And yeah, I can't see it going any other way. So that's not the time I want to go down because that's terrifying. But
Which, to be fair, is a scary thought because we're talking about what if Vince resigns, like next week or whatever. That'll be the timeline that happens. But Vince isn't going to be around forever as it is. So, is this just inevitable? Regardless, is this just the way naturally it would go, whether he steps down or not?
you like to have always thought that like because Steph is essentially you at one point you might have thought Shane, but Steph has certainly lined herself up and primed herself up to be the one who takes over the WWE.
But she
That's why we
has.
kind of went down that route.
But that's the current board of directors, who's pretty much made up of Vince McMahon and his friends. But obviously,
Exactly.
they
If
are a
it
public
sells,
company, so they have other shareholders and things to answer to, which is
bear in
why,
mind is whether they admit it or not, this board of directors signed off some payouts,
well,
so they're definitely part of the Vince McMahon and friends, aren't
yeah. But obviously, the company, they may stop the company from being public, or you don't know what they're going to do. But if Disney or someone like that ultimately ends up owning them, I just genuinely think the relationships that have been forged under Vince are just null and void. Essentially, they'll look at it as a typical business and go, "You're not qualified to produce a television show. You're not
they?
qualified
You
to
have no credentials. What
be
the
a
hell?
brand officer." You know what I mean? It's like, so at the end of the day, these people have got the jobs because of Vince. So yeah, big shake-ups at board level takes a lot of wrestling history and
Mm,
personality out of it. It could potentially kill it.
yeah, it certainly would cut the nepotism out, wouldn't it? Really, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I say unfortunately because I like my WWE how it is.
Yeah, I do think you'd get a very, aim towards kids, very good guy versus bad guy. Like, I mean, to be fair, I might love it. It might go back to the golden era. Everyone gets a gimmick again, and it's a whole brand new resurgence. Because let's be honest, as much as I love the Attitude Era and stuff like that, my favorite time was probably the golden era, and
Yeah,
we
and to be
never
fair,
had.
that lends itself more to that, like you say, that cartoony element, really.
Exactly. So I fucking loved it. So who knows? Maybe it won't die. Maybe I'll be the biggest supporter ever.
And in a way, though, like having a product like that, because like let's be honest, the age of our sons at the minute, you can't really watch AEW with them,
Hmm.
but you could watch Disney's Wrestling Hour or whatever they call it in the
Yeah,
end.
that's true. To be fair, like I wouldn't sit there and watch Blood and Guts with my 4-year-old. But that being
But you
said, I
watch
would definitely watch the West Coast.
WWD, wouldn't you?
That's what World Wrestling Disney.
What DWW? No,
WDW, World Disney
I think
Wrestling.
I wanted to make that something, and I was like, it'd have to be Disney's World Wrestling, wouldn't it? So DWW, but that doesn't work as good.
Hmm.
But that does
Hmm.
sound like something. It sounds like something you get at a Disney theme park, doesn't it? Disney's World of Wrestling.
Oh yeah, there'd be a whole new wrestling themed ride at Hollywood Studios or something.
Be a new roller coaster called like the Choke Slam or something.
Well, they've already gone. They've got movies and stuff at the minute on Netflix, haven't they? So Disney Plus will get their fair share as well.
I love the scenario as well. If Disney buys it, like Dwayne's there, like just when I thought I was out.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, so I
Like,
think, I
remind you,
mean,
Jungle Cruise, son.
I
Anyway,
think have we hit the bottom of that rabbit hole? Essentially, we've said
I mean,
we'd
it's a
go.
pretty quick rabbit hole. I think if
It would
if a company buys WWE, they're fucked. That's pretty much where we've gone with that scenario.
basically,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but
So
no, for me, like, and maybe this is just because it's the favorite option, but I'd like a world where Steph takes it on. Like that. That seems the world for me. Steph and Triple H run the show, and I'm sure many people echo that view of like them two being in control would be like just that's the way to run it. If obviously Vince isn't around, but yeah, I think that's pretty much that rabbit hole for the selling point of view, because I can't imagine. Well, I mean, let's look at one little scenario, Carl. And this is very much more unlikely, because I'm sure Vince wouldn't want this to happen regardless of his position in the future. It's up for sale, and Tony Khan is a big wrestler, Mark. What if AEW bought WWE? It's not out of the realms of possibility in terms of the guy's a billionaire. He could afford it. Whether his dad would let him, I don't know. But could we see AEW taking over basically all of the mainstream wrestling world by owning Ring of Honor, AEW, WWE at the same time? And then you've only got like Impact and NWA around them, really.
The thing that would terrify me about that is Tony would insist on booking all of them still. And so now he's responsible for booking God knows how many hours of television.
The cocaine consumption and sale would go right up. I kid. I don't even know if you do it, Tony. This just seems to be the going belief on the internet that you're a cocaine head.
I've never seen it to believe it. Let's put it that way.
Oh, you'd never do it on camera or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, like if we're talking sale, is it out of the realms of possibility that Tony could do that though?
I mean, his dad's mega rich, isn't he? So if his dad was willing to give him the money to buy it, then absolutely. So imagine that.
As an existing investment though, it's not a bad one. Like the risk was in AEW, wasn't it? It was setting it up from nothing, right? Mm. And Ring of Honor, I believe, didn't cost a great deal because he didn't buy the wrestlers' contracts. He bought the name, the brand, etc. But WWE, as an investment, it'd be like, well, they've got an existing library catalogue of
it cost
nostalgia.
A fortune.
It cost a fortune, but you go, well, there's money to be made there.
Imagine the moment of Tony Khan coming out on the Titantron of WWE and going, the new name on the contract does read Khan, but it's not Nick Khan, it's Tony Khan. And everyone's just like,
trouble is, like, he's the worst on-screen character though. Like he just needs to. If he bought the company, I just don't want to see his face. No offense to him, but he's not an on-screen guy. Like there's so many people. Bear in mind, a lot of the WWE fans would hate this, right? But he can't come out like a heel McMahon, can he? And be like, that's right, I bought it, live with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Vince would willingly sell it to Tony either. So I think that would only ever happen if Vince did step down or he wasn't affiliated with it anymore. I think
that's where you go. Like if he's like you say, there's a pride element, but if he's stepping down and it's a board of directors decision and it's about money, are some things going to be let go and they just go, you know what, fuck it, he loves wrestling and he'll keep it right. Because I get in a pride sense, Vince wouldn't want to sell it to Tony, but at the same time, if he like, what's his perspective on wrestling? Like, would he sooner sell it to Disney and it be nothing, or sell it to Tony and it still be a wrestling company? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
What pride do you go for? Do you go for the pride of keeping it as a company closer to what you started, or do you know that like a big company like Disney would tear it apart? What would you rather happen?
Who knows? Luckily, I don't have to make them decisions.
Of course you do, Carl, because you're in charge of Disney.
Oh boy.
What if? Yeah. Anyway, so that's just another little point. Like while we're talking sale,
so basically we could go
WWE
many different ways, but I think the one that we're saying would be most likely is it goes to Steph in the kind of short term at least until basically the board decide to sell it onto Disney, at which point
that's the scenario. Steph runs it. It gets a bit of a resurgence. We all love what it becomes. We love the new style Raw. That's a TV14 run by Triple H. We love the SmackDown having the classic WWE feel, and then the board of directors fuck it all up by selling it to Disney. That's the timeline we're going for.
Basically, yes. So so that's our thoughts on what happens if Vince resigns. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts. Do you think do you agree with what we've said? Do you think something entirely different would happen? Do you think Vince will live forever and this will never be a problem because the dude will just be running it when he's 212? Who knows?
Who knows?
So yeah, maybe we should change this to who knows instead of what if. But yeah, what if?
In a way,
that's how we should have ended. Yeah,
I mean that kind of
what if, and we end it with who knows. So there you go.
Although at the same time, I'm a bit like what if we have to steal from the hashtags and the like from Marvel? Yeah, that's right. Coming at you. Should I admit that? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah, so another fun-filled what if. So thank you again for selecting the topic we're going to talk about, or that we have spoken about. And yeah, I think next week we're probably going to do the premiere episode of debate. So we'll also be putting up some different topics that we might look to debate on our socials. So get involved again. So what are
Remind
we going
me
to talk about next week?
now. We're putting up the topics, and the audience can vote on that. But remind me, Carl, are we doing it on a coin flip as to who defends and who argues?
It's a good point. I don't think we decided on it. Maybe we should give it a go, see whether people even vote on, on us, and if not, then we'll just do it on a coin flip. But I think the main thing we'll definitely put up there is the different topics. So we'll think of 4 different topics we might debate, and then we will determine somehow who's going to be debating for and who will be debating against. So until next week, make sure you check out all the latest news in the Ringside Report. Check out This Week in Wrestling. Obviously, thanks for checking this out, and keep your eyes peeled on our socials, but also for a interview which will be dropping in a few days' time with a certain somebody from previously in the NWA. So yeah, keep your eyes open.
Certainly one to watch, an up and but also well-known person.
Indeed. So until next time, here is the one and only Griff Garrison to say, see you later.
This is Griff Garrison, and you're listening to A to the K.
A to the K. A to the K.